Okay, so now if you take a look at the gels, again the acrylamide I poured into here, you can see it's now polymerized. It's now essentially a solid gel. And then if we look at the gels itself, you can kind of pour the ethanol back. You'll see, if you look closely, you can see a line between the ethanol and the polymerized acrylamide. So what we're going to do is take this over the sink and essentially just pour that down the sink. And what we want to do is rinse the top part with water. We want to get rid of all the ethanol. We don't want to mix any ethanol with stacking acrylamide solution we're going to pour into the gel in a minute. So typically try to rinse about 3 times or so. And then just kind of shake. It's going to shake quite a bit on the camera. Just get rid of all the excess water. Do the same thing with the other set of 2 gels. Rinse 3 times with water. Okay. And now what we're going to do is pour the stacking part of the gel. So that again is also in the protocol in the handbook. So I'm going to do 4 gels, so essentially this 10 ml volume over here. I'm going to use the same conical tube I had before. So first thing is 6 mils of water. And then next we're going to need tris, and again this is the 0.5 molar tris pH 6.8. We're going to need 2.5 mils. Okay, next up is the acrylamide. So if you look at the protocol for 4 gels, we're going to need 1.3 mils. Rather than using a long pipette, what I typically do is just use a P1000 pipetter, set to 650 microliters, and pipette twice. That'll be a total of 1.3 mils. Okay, and the next up on the list is SDS, so we're going to need 100 microliters of that. Get the P100 for that. $100 microliters of 10% SDS. We're also going to need 10% APS, or 100 microliters of 10% SDS. And we're going to need 10 microliters of Temid. So we're going to need 10 microliters of that. And the last thing that's optional on here is bromophenol blue. So, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to add 100 microliters of bromophenol blue. That's over here in this blue solution, kind of dark purple brown kind of solution. I add 100 microliters of that. This is not required, but one of the nice things it allows it makes it easier to see the wells of the gel. So what will happen is the stacking part will essentially be blue. So I'm just going to pipette into all 4 gels. Oops. And we'll fill it really most of the way up. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do is stick the combs in there. So we have, typically I use these 15 well combs. That's a 10 one. I'm going to go grab another one from over here. Sometimes they're just left lying here after we pour gels. And so I'm just basically going to stick this in here. So what I'm going to do is usually go from one side over rather than straight down. Otherwise sometimes it's more likely to pop out. And it allows you to kind of push the bubbles over. So I'm going to go from left to right and stick it on there and push all the way down. And we also have like a 10 well comb. They sell different versions. I typically just use the 15. I usually have at least 12 samples or so to run. And so I'll put that in there. The gel will spill out in the bottom, but that's fine. And so if you look closely now, you can kind of see the comb is in there. There's blue below the well, so that allows space for the sample to ultimately be loaded into this sample. So we're done with the acrylamide and the APS. I'm going to put that away. Okay, so that's going to take 10-20 minutes or so to polymerize. And so once that's done, we're really done with the gels. And what we do is then you can run the gel immediately or put them away. So what I typically do I'll just show an example of what I do is typically once the gel's polymerized, I'll lay it onto the paper towel and then kind of wrap it around and then get it wet with distilled water. So you can see some previously poured gels I have here. Again, it looks all wet, and that helps us keep it hydrated. If it dries out, the gel is not going to be any good. So this helps to keep the gel a little bit longer. So you can see here I've got 2 gels, everything's polymerized. Eventually the blue dye might fade a little bit because it will diffuse into the stacking part. So ideally use the gel within a couple of weeks or so. I've used them sometimes a little longer. I typically try to use them within, like I said, a week or 2. So I won't record me showing that with these 4 gels just because it's going to take another 10 or 15 minutes. But essentially all I'm going to do once it's done is basically, again, you're going to have your gel. I'll set one up as a pretend gel. So again, this could have been polymerized. So let's pretend the gel is polymerized. Once I'm done, what I'm going to do is take the gel out, pull the little tabs towards you. This will fall out and down there. And now, in reality of the gel, you have a polymerized gel there, so the glass won't move. And I'll do 2 of them, wrap it up, put in some distilled water, and stick it in a sandwich bag. We usually have the sandwich bags up on the shelf up there. And then again, we'll just typically stick it in the fridge over here, so you can see we have several people that have gels that they've poured in the last few weeks here. And they're, again, like I said, they're good for a couple of weeks at least. And then you're ready to run samples for Western blot.